Welcome to Raza Heritage Month. Oh, I guess we're starting live now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Raza Heritage Month here at SAC. My name is Lucero Saldaña, and I am an adjunct here in SAC with the Humanities and Mexican American Studies courses. Welcome. We're so excited that you're joining in. Right now, we are going to actually be doing a little pre-game. We have 5 awesome prizes for you to win. All you have to do is actually put this PIN number that you see on the screen and join in Kahoot. And I will ask you a few questions about public figures and see how they identify as. So if you have some time, please make sure that you go either on www.kahoot.it, or you could go on the Kahoot app. The PIN is on the screen, so 8625493, and that way we can start playing. Right now we have 2 players. I see Mystery Squid, Radiant Puffin. So we're just waiting on y'all to go ahead and join in from wherever you're at. If you want to actually put in the comments where you're coming from, if it's from San Antonio, if you're from Austin, what city you're from, or even what state, maybe we reached out to a different state, go ahead and do that. We would love to see where you're joining from. It's like, yes, like we said, we have 5 awesome prizes for this Kahoot game, and so far we only have 2 players, so they might just win all the prizes. Who knows? We'll see. We do have great prizes coming up. I think some from Very That. Those of you who know who Very That is. Oh, thank you, Carolina. She's from San Antonio. San Antonio in the house. Whoop, whoop. All right. Anybody else want to tell us where they're from? I'm going to give it a couple more minutes, okay? Hopefully you can hear the music. All right. I see some East Side from SA. Ooh, San Antonio in the house. All right. I see Erica as well. Keep those comments coming. Make sure that you join that Kahoot game. If not, the 2 players who are joined in will actually win the prizes. It's like we do have 5 prizes right now. We have 3. All right. It's like, yes, Very That's so awesome. Oh, I don't have my Very That stickers. Actually, it's on my laptop. It's like I have her stickers all over my laptop. She's so awesome. The first prize will be a Very That Stationery Love Bundle gift set, and it's a $55 value. So why not join the Kahoot game so you can get something from Very That? She is wonderful. It's like you could definitely get cool prizes. I'm telling y'all. You want to join? We have 3 players. We'll give it a couple more minutes on this. And if you're joining in right now, please share it on Facebook. Call your friends. You will seriously win prizes right now. Like, who doesn't love winning free things? Prize number 2 is the Very That Plant Lover set. So it's a $45 value. And I'm a plant lady. I like plantitas everywhere. Don't have it right now in the background of my room, but I have some outside. So definitely something that we want to highlight. Okay, I got 3 players. Oh, and then prize number 3 is the Very That Nopal set. Nopales, come on, guys. It's like, love nopales. Those are one of my favorite types of stickers. Then we have prize number 4 with Barbacoa Apparel Bundle, another great business owner. We're over here supporting local businesses here in San Antonio, and we're very fortunate that we have these 2 that are really awesome. We have 4 players right now. Let's go ahead and try to do at least 5. See how it's going. And then I believe the fifth gift, if you guys want to know, it's from Feliz Martin, and it's a $40 value. And Feliz Modern has really cool stuff. I don't know if you guys been. I've been there. Oh my God, it's so awesome. You walk in there, you just want to put everything in your bag. You want to buy everything for sure. Okay, let's see. Okay, we got 4 players right now. It's like I'm hoping another 5th one, so that way we'll know who's in the lead. But I guess we might just start off with just 4. Let's wait another minute, see if we could get that 5th player. Like I said, please make sure you share, so that way we can get at least that 5th player in Kahoot. So we'll know who the top 3 are. Let me see. We have Hero Koala. That's a great one. And Elated Wildcat. Right? See. Oh, I think we have a couple more seconds. And then we're going to get started with our pregame. Like I said, we are focusing on identities today. And we're going to go ahead and get started since we're already at 5:40. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and start. So we're doing our SOY public figure game. Here is our quiz. So, actor Lou Diamond Phillips identifies as what? You know him as the person from La Bamba, right? Who played Richie Valens. Is he a Mexican? Does he identify as a Chicano, a Tejano, or a Filipino American? We'll give you a couple of seconds. And it shows our answer is actually Filipino American. Wow, those seconds went pretty fast. Okay. Are you ready for the second one? Second question? I know that went a little fast. Let me see how that goes. Let's go ahead and go to the second question where we're at. You guys have to keep up with the timer. Let's go forward. I guess we'll see what the next question is. Okay, next question. Eva Longoria identifies as a what? We know her from Desperate Housewives. Is she a Texacana, a Mexican American, a Latina, or a Chicana? We know what she identifies as. I think some of you guys are trying to, make sure you're searching this up and you're delayed. You're delaying on it. But she is a Texacana. That's what she identifies as it. Greg said it was a delay. Oh, I'm sorry. It is going a little fast. I'm not sure if we're delaying on our part. Let me see if I could give you guys a few more seconds. I'm going to go ahead and give you, let me go ahead and see what we have. Okay, we're still at 0. Let me see. We're going to talk about Cheech Marin. What does he identify as? Trying to work on the timing, but it's a little fast. So Cheech Marin identifies as a Mexican American, a chicharrón, a Hispanic, or a Chicano. We know him from obviously being Cheech. We're being delayed a little bit. Yeah. Can you tell me in the comments if you're being delayed still? It's a little bit too fast. Yeah, there's a delay on YouTube. Okay. Let me see if I can see who the next one is. I'm sorry, guys. Lively B. So actress Lupita Nyong'o identifies as a what? She was an Academy Award winner. She then identifies as an African, a Mexican, a Kenyan, or a Mexican. Yes, you could play here. If you don't win the prizes, that's okay. We could try to figure out something, Carolina. You could just, you won't be involved with the actual Kahoot game. I'm not sure why there's a very strong delay for these, but we'll try to figure out something as well. She identifies as a Mexican, actually. If you guys don't know, Lupita Nyong'o actually was born in Mexico, and her parents are from Kenya. So she acknowledges both, being born in Mexico, her Mexican roots, and then her Kenyan ancestry as well. Oh, you're on question 4. Oh my word. There is a very strong delay then. Let me see. Okay, here's the scoreboard, and we're going to go ahead and go to the next question. Rapper Bad Bunny identifies as what, according to him? Is he bisexual? Is he fluid? Is he queer? Or is he none of the above? If there's a delay in the Kahoot game, go ahead and just put it in the comments. Maybe that'll help us out a little bit. So rapper Bad Bunny actually identifies as fluid. He actually stated this in a article that he identifies as like most people now do, which is really awesome. Let's see where we're at. We're at to singer Demi Lovato. What does she identify as? Does she identify as queer, bisexual, fluid, or straight? Like I said, if the Kahoot isn't working for y'all, just go ahead and comment in the comments. We'll try to, tally up how many questions you have correct. Woo, both of you guessed. There we go. So she identifies as queer and fluid. So awesome. Some of you actually got that right. Let me see what the scoreboard is. Oh, no, nobody got it right. Oh, I thought we did. So the next one is singer Miguel. What does he identify as? Does he identify as an African American? Is he a Mexican American, Black, or is he other? Great question, Carrie. We might just cover that in our next segment. So actor Miguel actually identifies as African American and Mexican American. For those of you who don't know, his mother is actually African American and his father is actually Mexican. But because he was born here in the States, obviously Mexican American is the term that he states that he is. So he's both. Let's see where we're at. Oh, yay, Radio Puffin, you got some points up on the scoreboard. Cool. The Kahoot does not let me be on their right question. Oh, I'm so sad. Next time I know, guys, it needs to be, there's a delay on StreamYard. So next time I know, I need to make the questions, the answers longer. I'm so sorry. But go ahead and just comment below. Rapper Cardi B identifies as what? So we all know her. She has a hit out right now. I think she's #1. So what do you think she identifies as? And like I said, please go ahead and comment in the comments, and we'll try to tally up your the correct answers that you have for sure. So she identifies as most of these, I believe. We'll see. Oh, sorry, went too fast. She identifies almost every single part. I think it was Dominican. Let me go back. Let's see if I'll go back. Oh, no, it won't let me go back. She identifies as Dominican. I think she is Dominican by her dad's side of the family. I think her mother is from Trinidadian, I believe. So yeah, she's a mix of the Caribbean islands. Latinx, Caribbean, right? So yes, say she identifies as Latinx too. She has quite a few terms that she identifies as. Let's go ahead and go to our next question. Secretary of State, Julian Castro. We all know who Julian Castro is, those of you who are from San Antonio, right? He identifies as what? Is he a Chicano, a Hispanic, a Latino, or a progressive? If you can't do the Kahoot, make sure that you answer in the comments. We definitely have prizes for you to have. So from my research, I have seen him state that he's Chicano, Latino, progressive, but I have not seen him state that he is Hispanic at this point. So those of you who guessed correctly in those three terms, you guys got a point. Oh, look at those points going up. Radiant Puffin. Okay, Representative AOC. We have seen her in the news. She has made waves in politics. What does she identify as? Latina, Puerto Rican, Democratic Socialist, cisgendered woman. What do you think? What is the terms? Yay! Yeah, she identifies as almost every single one of these terms. So as you could tell, we do have, there's a lot of people who identify as very many terms according to what they, they feel like. And then we have some that are just very specific. They're like, we want to be called, maybe Chicano, or we want to be called maybe Texan, right? All right, let's go ahead and go to the next one. Ooh, look at those points go up. Okay, actress Yaritza Aparicio identifies as what? She is best known as being the lead in Roma. She was a teacher before she was an actress. She actually, I believe, was auditioning for Roma because her sister asked her for a favor. So she actually identifies as indigenous and Oaxacan. She is from the state of Oaxaca, but she does not identify as Mexican or Latina. She identifies as more towards her indigenous roots. Alrighty. Okay, last question for y'all. Okay, journalist John Quinones identifies as what? Those of you who don't know, John Quinones is actually from San Antonio. Does he identify as Hispanic, Mexican, Latino, or Mexican American? Make sure you drop it down in the comments. So he identifies as Mexican American. I believe he is from the West Side as well. So puro pride, West Side pride there, right? Alrighty. We're trying to see who our top 3 is. Radiant Puffin, you are number 1 according to Kahoot. I know that some of you also played here in the comments. So we do realize that the Kahoot game was a little fast. There was a little delay. So we'll definitely try to help y'all out over here. From my understanding, if you are in the top 3 right now, let's go ahead and if you want to go ahead and DM us at our Instagram, and we will definitely send you your prize. I believe it takes a few weeks until the prize comes in. Okay, but I promise you will receive your prizes. So if Radiant Puffin, Elated Wildcat, and then the Lively Bee, you guys make sure that you DM us for sure. I'm not sure who you guys are. Actually, make sure that you find us on our Instagram and then the link tree in the comments below. So I believe the link tree should be connected, and make sure you find us on Instagram, okay? DM us if you're those three. I believe there was 2 others who joined. Those of you who joined as well in the Kahoot game, if you want to DM us too, we will definitely make sure that you also get a prize for this game. We do apologize. We do apologize because, oh no, the Radiant Puppet doesn't have an Instagram. We're going to figure out something, okay? No worries. Mona, we're going to figure out something. Well, you could actually email us, most likely. You would like the gift going to a student. Okay, that's so nice. Thank you so much. We'll definitely work that out with one of our students. Thank you for playing so much. I hope that you guys enjoyed our game. It was a little fast, but definitely very informative to see how these people identify as, right? There's certain terms they like to use, certain terms that they don't like to use, and that's something that we're going to discuss in the panel that's coming up at 6, okay? I know Mona in the comments is saying that she wants to give her prize out to students. That's so sweet. Carolina too is saying that she give the prize out to a student también. Thank you so much for both of y'all for being so generous and giving out the prizes to a student. We'll try to figure out something for sure. It's like, so we have around 5 more minutes until we are gonna start with our panel with SOY. Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate it. I hope that you guys were, kind of thinking about how these public figures actually identify as. Like I said, I was trying to pay attention to see what words they used and what words they did not. Don't get me, I don't think that they used, how should I say? I think they use other words too, but those are the ones that I researched from recent articles, right, and interviews. But yeah, it's very informative to see how they identify. And this also gets you into the mode of thinking how you yourself identify as, because you obviously identify as a certain term. For instance, I identify as Chicana. That is the term that I like to use. I actually do not like the word Hispanic. There is a history with the word Hispanic. That is the reasoning, my personal reasoning why I don't identify as Hispanic. But Chicana is the preferred term I use. But there's other people who use other terms. Like, for instance, we have Latinx, right? We have, like I said, Hispanic. We have Afro-Latinos, Afro-Mexicans. So we have different terms that we use. Indigenous, right? We have indigenous terms as well. Yeah, thank you so much. This is my first time hosting, so let me know in the comments how I did. Now I know, guys, that I definitely need to give you more time, though, for Kahoot games for the next time with the delay. But please let me know how I did, what I need to work on. Who knows? Maybe this could be another job I have, hosting, games, virtual games. Why not? Like, we're stuck at home anyways, right? It'll be fun to have. Thanks, Greg. You identified as Indigenous and Texan X. Oh, I've never heard of that, Greg. That is a new term. If you guys want to go ahead and put in the comments how you identify as, go ahead. That's really awesome. I've never heard of that, Greg. I need to have a conversation with you. That is a great term. I'm going to have to use that one day. I like that for sure. Thank you, Carolina. I appreciate it. It's like, thank you, Carrie. Appreciate it as well. Hopefully my gig as a host, maybe somebody will hire me out there. Maybe I could be like Wheel of Fortune or something. That'll be really cool. Maybe Jeopardy. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we need our own, like a Mexican American Latino Jeopardy game. I don't think I've ever seen that. I think that'll be really cool to do as well. So we have 1 more minute until we start our next panel. Carrie, thank you so much. You identify as Hispanic. Many of us do, right? Many of our community here in San Antonio, and obviously across the nation, they identify as Hispanic for sure. So we will definitely get into the history of some terms in the next few minutes to see how our panelist actually identifies as, and why is it so complicated? Why is one term accepted for somebody and one not for the other, right? But yeah, so yes, make sure if you have not put in the comments what you identify as, please let me know. And maybe at the very end of this panel coming up, maybe you will try to find a new term to identify as. We don't know. Greg, okay, thank you. No one is, he hasn't seen anybody use the Texan X or Tejano X before, but I really like that. That's a new term for sure. Greg, did you create that? I'm wondering if you created that, or if you know who created that. Because like I said, I've never heard of that. It's really interesting for sure. All right. In a couple of minutes, we're going ahead and we're going to get started. We're just trying to organize everything for our panel. Let's see if we have anyone in the comments. No one. We're just trying to organize everything in the panel. I hope that you like the games. Like I said, did a little bit of research to see about these public figures and how they identify as. If you are watching, make sure you share this. Make sure you share this video out. This is very informative for sure for anybody to know what type of terms people identify as. Oh, cool, Greg. You also identify, you have some indigenous blood in you. Yeah, most of us do. I still actually have to research a little bit more about my indigeneity. I think I came up with it. You came up with it on your own. Greg said he came up with the term, but he doesn't know. Maybe somebody else also decided to use the X at the very end, which is really creative. It's like, yeah. I know Carrie said that she's never heard that before. Yeah, that's a term. That's a new term for sure. Greg, you should write. You should definitely write something about that. How you came up with that term. Really cool. Carolina, thank you for telling us you're Chicana and Tejana. Erika, thank you for telling us that you're Hispanic and that you're here to learn what other terms might apply to you. That's what we're here for. We're here to, definitely learn and see what we can identify as. Like I said, some of us are very strict on the terminology, and some of us are like, yeah, I can identify as this over here, this over there. They have an umbrella of terms, so we'll definitely let us do that. Okay, I believe my time is almost up. I think we're going to have Profesora Lisa Ramos coming in.
Hi. Can everyone hear me? Can you all post in the comments if you can hear me? Okay, perfect. So welcome everyone to San Antonio College's Raza Heritage Month for 2020. This is a historic Raza Heritage Month because we're doing it all virtually. And as you see on the PowerPoint, our month is actually going to go a little bit over. It's September 15th through October 20th. So this is our opening ceremony, if you will. So we're very excited to have you here. We hope you will enjoy this event and that you come back and join us for other events. So for the next slide, Jasmine, are you controlling the slides or am I? Sorry, a little technical difficulty. Okay, so then I am just going to do this, and I'm trying to give me 1 second to adjust my screen because I just want to be able to see both the StreamYard screen and my PowerPoints. Okay, so what I would like to do next is I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. And so a land acknowledgement, it's probably too small for many of you all to see, but it is an Indigenous protocol to show that we have gratitude to the Indigenous peoples who've been living and working on these lands for thousands of years. So to acknowledge those Indigenous ancestors and peoples who are still here, I would like to read this. So we would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous lands of Coahuiltecan peoples, the original stewards of the land upon which San Antonio College, SAC, in San Antonio, Texas, is located. We want to thank the Indigenous caretakers of this land. We acknowledge the Payaya people of Yanaguana, who knew this area as San Antonio, and as it's still known to their descendants. We also acknowledge the Tapilam Coahuiltecan Nation, who are native to what we now call the South Texas and Northeast Mexico region. We also acknowledge the Carrizo Comecrudo Nation, whose traditional territory we are also living on. Finally, we acknowledge the Lipan Apache, the Tonkawa, Kickapoo, Comanche, and other Native nations whom various settler colonizer societies forcibly displaced from their territories. As past, present, and future caretakers and knowledge keepers of this land, we are committed to acknowledging these Indigenous lands and Indigenous peoples, as well as continuing to address and deconstruct our own privileges and internalize settler colonizer thoughts and behaviors. We respectfully ask for permission to teach, learn, and grow on these lands. Over the next month, we will strive to counter the doctrine of discovery, which for too long has dismissed Indigenous peoples with stories and practices of survival, strength, and resilience. So again, we're doing this to acknowledge that this place has a rich and deep history. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. Just want to make sure you all can see it. So on this slide, what I have on here is an explanation of why Raza, not Hispanic Heritage Month. So we actually changed our name from Hispanic to Raza Heritage Month 2018. So this is actually the third Raza Heritage Month at SAC. And we did that for several reasons. We wanted to honor Dia de la Raza, which is a commemoration of all peoples in Latin America. And this is something that's celebrated in many Latin American countries, from Chile to Venezuela to Mexico. And also, the word raza was very common during the Chicano movement. You heard the refrain, Viva la Raza, during this time period. And this was the 1960s and 1980s. Another reason we use the word raza is that it's a common word in Spanish. It's been used for over 100 years. Some people do associate the term raza with la raza cósmica, the cosmic race. And if you study that, it is a racist ideology because it's said that Indigenous peoples by themselves were not enough, that they were deficient, and they would only improve when mixed with Spanish or other European blood. So in that context, the word la raza cósmica is very problematic, is racist. But in and of itself, the word raza is commonly translated as the people. So the word raza existed before and outside of this context of la raza cósmica. So the term Hispanic arose during the presidential administration of Richard Nixon, and various federal officials, Mexican American organizations came together and created the word Hispanic. So the word Hispanic, it's specific to the US, it's newer, and it comes from the top down. It comes from politicians and federal officials. So when our committee met in 2018, we really wanted to honor a word that is more widespread, that is older in its lineage, and that comes from the bottom up, meaning from the people, from la gente. And that is why we changed the name in 2018. If you would like to be part of the committee for 2021 and have a suggestion for another name, please join us. You can find out more information in the SAC Talk newsletter put out by the SAC Marketing and Strategic Communications group. And they release that every week, and sometime in late spring to early summer, you'll see an announcement about Raza Heritage Month in 2021. Okay. So if you need some references, I have some references on the side. So just if you have any questions about this, because we've gotten questions through the years, always feel free to reach out to me, Professor Ramos. Okay. So that is all I have for now. This next slide is actually for after the speakers talk. So what I want to do next is turn it back to Lucero, who is going to introduce our guests. I'm hoping that they're all there in the background. And she's going to read the bio of our first speaker. Our first speaker, if she is here, is Celeste Aguilera. And then after Celeste speaks, we're going to have Mr. Anthony Zurita speak. And then we can just go on from there, Lucero. So I'll let you all take it over from here. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. Like I said before, my name is Lucero Saldana. I'm an adjunct professor here at SAC. Let me go ahead and introduce Ms. Celeste Aguilera. She is a first-generation Mexican-American woman. She is 19 years old and a sophomore at SAC, majoring in public administration. She will be transferring to UTSA. Go Runners! This upcoming spring semester. Some of her hobbies include reading young adult novels with her younger sister, listening to all kinds of music, watching movies with her father, and journaling in her spare time. Please welcome Ms. Aguilera. Nice to have you.
Hi, thank you. Nice being here.
All right.
So the questions that I asked all of our speakers to address today is to talk about their own identities, to talk about the sources of their identities, maybe talk about the social or historical context where you actually lived and grew up, or if there was some sort of event, or maybe it's a generational thing. So you're Gen Z, so those might be things you talk about. But also finally, what kind of influence do your identities play in your day-to-day life? So you can address any or some of those points. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess a main part of my identity is the fact that I see myself as a Mexican American. And the thing with that is, well, I've been living here in San Antonio all my life, born and raised. My parents both are from Mexico, completely raised. They came here to America here when they were, I believe, around 16, so fairly young. And, we had just kind of like your average kind of Chicana-like lifestyle where we grew up going to Catholic church on the weekends, going to, La Pulga whenever we could, going to yardas, going to family parties, speaking Spanish as our primary language at home. I being put in a bilingual program from primary school up until middle school. All of those things, they really shaped how I viewed the world. Those kinds of things. They warp the kind of person that you are. They shape your values, those types of things. I would say at some point I became more aware of what it really meant to be a Mexican American the moment I saw that there was some disconnect between my experiences and that of my parents. Part of it was when I had transferred from a predominantly Hispanic community to a much more white community. This was around when I was around 12 or 13, so around middle school years. And I had noticed that there were so many more people that did not look like me. You could say it's almost a bit of a culture shock. And the people that I was around were all wealthier, whiter, you could say more privileged people. And I was just like a fish out of water, feeling so out of place. I was just trying to find some form of connection to anyone else that had similarities to my background. And there were a few, and I enjoyed their experience. I enjoyed getting to know them for who they are. And, it felt odd to be looked at as different in that new school, to be looked at as your experiences are different, or they're unique, or they're not the same thing as me. That was odd because I'd been so used to having my background being the norm for everyone around me. So taking that away, it kind of reinforced that identity of I have Mexican roots in me, and I'm very proud of them because I know that it's unique to me and not to any of these people. So when I think about that, it makes me feel happier that I can say I'm bilingual and I can speak Spanish when I go and apply or for jobs or an internship or anything. I take that identity with me and saying, when you're bringing me into any company or to any school or any job, you're bringing everything that I am, and that's part of it. So that kind of explains the Mexican American part of me. I included the first generation part because I had noticed that there was also another sense of disconnect within my own community. And that would be, I was raised with a lot of people identified as being Chicanos or Chicanas. And at first I was like, yeah, that definition, it sums me up. I should be a Chicana. And I do to a degree. By definition, yes. But as I got older, I understood that the word Chicana has a history behind it. It has, a history that's being carried with it that I don't have. As I had mentioned before, my family had all moved here earlier in their life. My parents around 16, and that was just in the early 90s when they had come back. So fairly recent. I was born and raised here, and I noticed that my experiences compared to that of my parents are very different. But then I noticed that even with my classmates who are also Hispanic or Mexican American or, some form of Chicanx, they also have very different experiences than me. And they have a privilege of having their families been living here in America for so long, whereas my family is still barely getting their feet in the ground, So when I'd noticed that, I'd realized that there's a bit of a difference between being a first generation Mexican American here versus families that had been here for generations. And I had become more aware of the history behind it as hearing about people who don't speak Spanish but are Hispanic, and it's because their parents didn't teach them because schools had a policy against being able to speak freely in Spanish, or to kind of suppress any kind of Mexican roots that you had. Your hair's too curly, your hair shouldn't be so big and nappy, those types of things. And it was a bit shocking to me because at first I had seen it as, why are you trying to hide part of who you are? That's ridiculous to me. And then I realized, no, it's not necessarily that they want to do, it's the fact that we live in a country that's just how they treat them. And living in a much more newer generation, younger generation, I've been lucky enough to not have had to experience those types of negative experiences, thankfully. I mean, I've heard stories of people saying that they need to straighten their hair because their curls were too distracting, or, you know, ridiculous things like that. And it's a shame. It's a shame that that's a norm for so many people that have been living here. That said, when I think about the Chicanos or Chicanas or Chicanx or the Chicanx movement, I see that they have been fighting for so long to secure their place here in this country. And they have aunts, they have grandparents, they have politicians that they've seen, they grew up with. That's them. They have that experience, and I admire them greatly for it. I, however, don't necessarily have that. My family is still trying to get their bearings, now trying to gain a sense of security within this country. And I say that mainly because my parents were undocumented for so long. And when they had come here, that just recently were they able to get their residency. That adds a new barrier to the way they view themselves in this country versus to other Chicanos and Chicanos. Chicanos and Chicanas. They're not going to know what that experience is like. They're not going to know what the experience of an undocumented immigrant is going to have. It's not at least universal to the entire movement. It's its own little area within the movement. And that's the side that I've seen overshadowed, and why I take somewhat of a different take on the word Chicano and Chicana, because I feel like it almost excludes the experiences of people like my parents. So I felt more comfortable with the word Mexican American, because no matter how you look at it, it's what I am. I have Mexican roots, entire family's from Mexico, and yet I was raised in America. I speak English perfectly. I have American-like values, you could say, and my experiences are not that of someone who was born and raised in Mexico, and I can acknowledge that and understand that. But that's kind of how I've shaped it, or created my unique perspective of how I identify. As far as how it impacts me every single day, like I said, whenever I go out or whenever I apply for different companies or jobs, I feel so proud that I could say that I speak two languages, that I could say that I have a different perspective from typical people that are applicants, that I have something unique to bring to the table, and no one else can bring that. Whenever I go out and I write papers about politics or democracy or anything like that, I have a unique perspective that no one else is going to have. And it's because of my upbringing. It's because of how I identify. It's because I'm able to open my mind to different avenues of identity. Those are all different ways of being able to craft who you are as a person, to shape what your experiences are going to be. And it's I mean, that itself is something to be praiseworthy of. Anybody who can say that they're Hispanic or Chicana or Chicano or anything of the above, when they find security within a label like that, when they find a sense of value within themselves, it's a very powerful thing. They can build themselves up. They build their self-esteem. They find who they are. And not only is it a powerful thing because it builds your confidence, it's a beautiful thing because it's you finding who you are as a person. I don't know if I went over time or yet, or
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Thank you for that powerful testimony. Really, it was great listening to you just speak about your experience and the reasoning why you choose a certain term over another, right?
So next we're going to have Mr. Anthony Zurita, who is a staff member, and we're going to have Lucero Saldana, Professor Saldana, read his bio. And Anthony, the same points that I posed to Celeste, I'll pose to you is, talk to us about your identities. Tell us the sources of your identities, and if there's particular historical context or social context, like your generation, your family's number of generations in the US, or a particular place you grew up, like Celeste was just sharing. And then finally, in your day-to-day life, like how do you see your identities influencing you? So I'll let Lucero read your bio, and then we'll switch to you.
Anthony Zurita has been with San Antonio College for 4 years as a certified academic advisor with the TRIO STEM SS program. Mr. Zurita obtained his Bachelor's of Arts in Disciplinary Studies in 2010 and a Master's of Education in Curriculum and Instruction in 2014 from the University of Texas at San Antonio. Like I said, good runners. Here you go, Mr. Zurita, you can take the floor. Oh, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, and 1, 2.
There you go.
Am I? All right. Thank you very much for inviting me. Celeste, thank you very much. Preach on. I loved it. Wanted to start out with where I grew up is in a small town between Austin and Dallas, Waco. I won't talk too much about it. It's not really much to talk about. The identities that I have finally come around to be a part of is, of course, Mexican American. I think, as Celeste said, it sums me up. Indigenous as well, African American, and definitely a person of color. All of these sources are definitely have to do with where I grew up, family and friends that I've kept. Some of these sources was definitely my family. We're very tight-knit family. On my dad's side, I am a third generation, and on my mother's side, I am second generation. Her father, my grandpa Antonio, came over here during the Revolution. He was one of the hundreds of thousands of people who walked from Mexico fleeing the Revolution. And I have a cousin right now who's actually writing a book on his journey over here. Other things that I guess pursued, helped me come with these identities is the small town that I grew up in was definitely divided. We had different parts of, as Miss Celeste said, some parts were held certain other peoples of color, other parts had other peoples of color. So where I grew up with mainly was in the African American community. And so I definitely have a view of being a person of color through that perspective, being one of the few Mexican Americans in the school representing our culture. Other things that came to help me identify is definitely, I've been in San Antonio since 2010, and coming to UTSA and taking all the Mexican American Studies courses that I can put in my transcript, I definitely took. So I took Mexican American Literature, Mexican American History 1 and 2. You named it, I took it, and I got to meet, really, I got to learn what I was looking for. A big part of me really never knew the history. We talked about it in our family, but learning from these different professors and just being enthralled in all of this education really gave me the confidence to understand where my roots were, how I became this Mexican American as a second generation and third generation. I read books that were such as Caballero. I was introduced to Gloria Anzula barely in 2010. I got to read George Washington Gomez. All of these things just really blew my mind. I never knew Mexican American Studies existed. I've never met too many people of color in my hometown that looked like me, who had the same interests as me. In my generation, I grew up in the 80s. I went to Head Start program in the 80s. And unfortunately, my parents didn't bring me up Spanish speaking, although my mother was first language was Spanish. My dad was definitely first language was Spanish. However, in the 80s, there were not a lot of, how do you say, educational support for bilingual students. So from what I can gather from my mother, that she told me, is she didn't teach me at that young of an age because she wanted a little bit more opportunity, and hence it did help me along the way. Also, it kind of hurt me because I had to learn Spanish a lot later, and it also kind of it was kind of a little bit that was missing from my culture, as I didn't know the language. You know, that's not my first language, but I'm definitely getting better at it, and definitely my goal is to speak fluently. The other impacts that I have, I definitely feel that being Mexican American on a daily is just one of my best friends said, he loves it. I love being Mexican American. I love being a person of color. I wouldn't change it for anything. And how I go along with my day-to-day life, I just carry myself with the utmost respect of of that confidence that I have of obtaining these 2 degrees, learning my history, not per se as in my family history, but the history of the Mexican American culture, especially in the Southwest. Um, it just really moved me to a point to, it was always something that was missing, and by that is how I hold my identity every day. I hold honor in being here in this present moment. I was taught in these Mexican American studies that the blood that runs through my vein is what they call ancient blood, is what they call blood memory. And when we're looking into the mirror, we're actually seeing our indigenous people, our ancient relatives in our face. You know, this blood that we have flowing through our veins is definitely ancient and spiritual blood. Uh, for example, if my grandfather on my mother's side, if he just happened to get sick walking over here from the revolution, I wouldn't be here. So, you know, I definitely, every day I try to represent my culture, my identity, who I identify with, to the utmost respect. I definitely say a lot of the people who, uh, family, friends, especially friends now that we've gotten a lot older and we're professional and we have families and we've become educated, we definitely strive to holding this Mexican American identity more closer, more as to, it's a more spiritual thing. You can't, you just really can't take that away. That identity. We're connected to the land because at one time this was Mexico. Um, you know, we have a lot of ties too, as Miss Dr. Ramos read the proclamation at the first. How I show this, one of the questions was if I talk to this to my kids, and I have definitely small children or older children, and I do try to help them with trying to find their identity as to what I've learned at UTSA, different PBS specials. I definitely try to educate them as to our history, as what progress we've made, what things we've accomplished in our communities. And let me see if I missed one more thing. So again, I guess what really put this in perspective, it was being educated. Living here in San Antonio really opened my eyes to just many of the different celebrations that are celebrated throughout San Antonio, this being one of them. And again, growing up in a small town that was not really Mexican American affiliated, this was just something that I had been looking for quite some time. Um, Again, that's why I'm in the role that I'm in. Education is really what set me free. Just knowing that I can obtain these degrees and educate myself and know how to critically think, and pretty much has helped me find who I am and what I identify with. And sequence is good. Alrighty, I think that sums me up.
Thank you. So for those of you who don't know, this is my first time using StreamYard. Lucero, Jasmine, Selena and I practice. And let me tell y'all, it is a little stressful, but we are hanging in there. I just wanted to acknowledge that because I did not say thank you to Celeste, who did an amazing job. Gosh, for your age, Celeste, you're so wise beyond your years. And then Anthony, I've known Anthony for about 5 years now. I had no idea you grew up in Waco. So like,
Yeah, I don't touch on many people.
I lived in Bryan Station for 7 years, so we need to talk because I bet we
Oh,
have
really?
experiences. So thank you, Anthony. Thank you to Celeste for just sharing your story. And I'm going to turn it over to Lucero, who is going to introduce our next guest, and then I'm going to share with our next guest the points that I've shared with the other speakers.
I want to point out as well, I actually grew up in East Texas, so we're all in the area. It's like, yeah, definitely. I grew up near the Tyler area. So our next guest is Erika Alcocer. She is a queer non-binary femme living in occupied Cahuiteco, Carrizo, and Comencrudo, Apache and Indian territory. Let me know if that's wrong, if I pronounce that wrong. Also known as Austin. Their focuses are in radical social and self-awareness, abolition, disability, transformative justice, decolonization, and Texas, Mexico borderland curanderismo. They are a community organizer with practices rooted in the liberation of all colonized folks and work that centers queer, trans, Black women, femme folks, and queer, trans, non-Black, Indigenous women, femme folks. Erika is currently finishing their undergrad degree in Spanish and Mexican American Studies with a minor in race, ethnicity, gender, sex, and sexuality studies at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Welcome, Erika.
Thank you, Erika. So what we're asking each of our speakers to talk about is about your identities, the sources of your identities, and any historical or social context that you want to share with us, like the generations of your family that have been here in this land, or a particular experience that may have shaped you. And then the last point we're asking everyone to talk about is how in your day-to-day life these identities reveal themselves. So can't wait to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Professora. And thank you to everybody who spoke before me. Thank you to the interpreters and everybody here watching. I identify, as you heard in my intro, as a non-binary queer femme, non-Black person of color from San Antonio, Texas, occupied lands, occupied Indigenous lands. I'm polyamorous. I believe that I am of Mexican American descent from the being third generation on both my paternal and maternal side. I consider having Indigenous descent as well, but also want to recognize of colonized descent by way of the conquista. I identify as an abolitionist, as an Aquarius, as a undergrad student, a lifelong student, I guess, a sibling, and a co-parent. I would say that sources of my identity have been, of course, my family, my parents, my upbringing. I was born in San Antonio, and then I was moved to Austin, or North Austin, Round Rock, occupied Tonkawa land. And that was a really big shock because San Antonio is very brown, very person of color oriented, and moving to Round Rock, where there was still people of color, but the majority of people were white, and not just white people, but like very country white people. So it kind of took me out of that South Side. I grew up on Mayfield, or I was more grown up on Mayfield and then brought to this other space of North Texas, and it made me more aware of my skin color, the fact that my hair wasn't straight. And there began my process of assimilation, right? Assimilating, wanting to assimilate proximity to whiteness. And then it took leaving Round Rock and going back to San Antonio many times when I was 17 and 18 to go to UTSA to kind of rediscover myself, right? And I went through the identity of being a Chicana, being Mexicana, being Latina, and understanding myself in those contexts. But then I left school, I left UTSA after a semester and had my whole life for 10 years, and then came back to San Antonio to finish my undergrad in 2017. Now, in this time, this is one of my big sources of identity shaping because I was much older and on my own and really beginning to explore my sexuality and my gender and taking gender studies class. Props to my professor, Sarah Montoya, LGBTQ studies at UTSA, who really broke open and pushed me to unlearn a lot of the things that I had accepted about myself because those were the things that I knew. And really pushed me to see the problematic ways I was participating in through my indoctrined state of like being an assimilated person, being a colonized person. And so began my studying, learning, participating, listening to Black scholars, Indigenous scholars, Black scholars like Kimberly Crenshaw, Angela Davis, Audre Lorde, Indigenous scholars like Kim Tallbear and Eve Tuck. These are all folks that have shaped my identity as identifying as a non-Black person, as a non-Native person, because that is not my lived experience. And I want to make sure that I am acknowledging my power and my privilege in that proximity to whiteness. And other folks who really inspire me are Alan Peleas Lopez, who is also known as Migrant Scribble on Instagram. They have incredible work that talks about betraying Latinidad, and a village scholar on Instagram who talks about divesting from brownness. And so these are Black folks, Black voices, Indigenous voices that I listen to that help shape me and my identity to how I can be an accomplice and how I can fight for Black liberation. And then being a queer person, I mean, as a co-parent, as a partner, as a, child of two arguably cis hetero people, I live that every day in school with pronouns, in class, in Espanol, in Spanish. I, challenge the gender binary by my own existence and identity of using they, them pronouns. And in my work as a community organizer and someone who believes in transformative justice and disability justice, I want to recognize myself as an able-bodied person and as a person who's working in community with folks of all abilities and all identities. So I think it really, my identity is important in shaping how I interact with the world because it has all these intersections that meet with other folks' intersections, and we work together to fight for radical revolution. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Erika, for sharing your unique experiences, for sharing some wonderful scholars. I love me some Kimberly Crenshaw. Oh my goodness. Like that, her work, yeah, it's so powerful. And I've been following her over the summer, the African American Policy Forum and some of the talks she's been hosting. So thank you for sharing that with everyone and your story. So last but not least, we have Profesora Patricia Portales, who's coming up. She has been at SAC for many years, and she, I was going to give you a little of her bio, but I'll let Lucero do that. And after Lucero's done, I'll just repeat the points that we're asking our speakers to address.
Okay, Doctora Patricia Portal is a professor of English and Humanities at San Antonio College. She earned her Master's of Arts in English from St. Mary's University and a PhD in English from the University of Texas at San Antonio. Her research includes contemporary literature with a concentration in ethnic literature and oral history. She serves on the San Antonio Book Festival Advisory Committee and is a contributing writer for the Book Reviewer, for San Antonio Current, and the Rivard Report. Her work has also been featured in Latina Latinos in World War II, Mobility, Agency, and Ideology, published by the University of Texas Press. Welcome, Doctora.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So again, what we're asking all of our speakers to address are your identities, the sources of your identities, any particular historical or social context that has influenced that, whether it's growing up in a certain region or the generations your family has lived on these lands. And then finally, in your day-to-day life, how do these identities, how do you enact them? How do they come out? Thank you.
Thank you. I grew up in San Antonio. On my mother's side, my grandmother was Tejana. In fact, a couple of years ago, my mom and I went to the genealogy floor of the Enchilada Library downtown to do some research, and we found a lot of information on my grandmother's side. So she was at Tejana here before the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And on my father's side, my grandparents came over, as many of ours did, during the Mexican Revolution. So just like Anthony had said a minute ago, I grew up like that, where my parents spoke Spanish to each other. So we lived in, a Spanglish household. And what really opened my eyes was going to St. Mary's University. St. Mary's has a really strong liberal arts education. St. Mary's was where the great Willie Velasquez went to school. So Willie Velasquez and a lot of organizations that were new in, the 70s, like Mayo and Maso. Charlie Cottrell, who was the president of St. Mary's a few years ago, was good friends with Willie Velasquez. So there were lots of organizations and things at St. Mary's that really opened my eyes to identifying. By the way, I identify as Chicana, and that probably has to do with going to St. Mary's University in the 90s. And I had a graduate director, Dr. Gwendolyn Diaz, who specialized in U.S. Latino literature and in Latin American literature. And so we were just reading the most amazing texts. And I'm almost gonna mirror a lot of what Anthony said. We were reading George Washington Gomez, we were reading Caballero, of course, Sandro Cisneros, and those are all things I had never seen in literature before, even though I had always, K through 12, loved English. I was reading all kinds of literature, but it wasn't until I got to college that anybody had even introduced me to any Latino authors at all. And thank goodness to my St. Mary's professors who did that. And also, I was part of an organization called Mecha, and one thing that really opened my eyes was the idea of United Farm Workers. They would have us, really it was a consciousness raising time. They asked us, think about where your food came from, think about the hands that pick this produce that you eat. So just really a lot of consciousness raising. The other thing that really opened my eyes was going to UTSA. By the way, I do know Sarah Montoya, Dr. Sarah Montoya. She and I had overlapping cohorts at UTSA, but I was very lucky to study with Dr. Norma Cantu, Ben Olguin, Luis Mendoza, Sonia Saldivar Hull, Norma Alarcon, and all of those things came together to just make for, a dream team of professors. I took a class, one day I was walking in the hallway at UTSA, and there was a flyer up, and it said Chicanos and Chicanas in film. And I remember I was walking and I saw it on the wall, and when I saw it, I backed up and I looked at the flyer, and it was, you know, talking about the coming semester. So I absolutely enrolled in that class, and we talked about film and literature. I was introduced to, you know, National Association of Latino Independent Producers, which I didn't even know existed. Films by Cristina Ibarra, who did a short film called Dirty Laundry. You know, Jim Mendiola, who did a film called Pretty Vacant about San Antonio. It was just like a combination of a lot of those things. So UTSA and St. Mary's both, you know, opened my eyes to identity. I was also at St. Mary's writing for the St. Mary's Rattler, but in our organization for Mecha, we also had a paper called El Espíritu de Aztlán. And so I was writing for that newspaper too. And, you know, writing the articles is a really good way to get you to think about your topics, right? So that really raised my consciousness as well. And then friends and I would trade books by Vicky Ruiz, by Cynthia Orozco, just all of these great writers. I feel that another thing that happened in the 90s was Sandra Cisneros had won the MacArthur Genius Award. And it just so happened that she wanted to make sure that people of color who had won that award came to San Antonio for a conference. And so all of these people at different universities and community agencies came together to help her put together that conference. And that's where I met Antonio Castañeda, the historian, Dr. Arturo Madrid at Trinity. So really it's just about, you know, all the mentors that we get to learn from when we go to school, right? Thank goodness for our education. One thing about the historical and social context of all of that, plus my family, is that I had always been really interested in my father's oldest siblings who had participated in World War II. And his two oldest brothers, my dad was too young to go to World War II, but my dad's two oldest brothers, who were far older than he was, participated in World War II. And my aunt also had been a welder. So she was like Rosie the Riveter, except Rosita the Riveter. And so I did oral histories and I interviewed them, and I made sure to archive that. There's a Voices project up at UT Austin that's looking for people to turn in oral histories. If any of you have any family that participated in World War II, they're also doing one right now for pandemic stories. But please make sure to go to their website because we need our stories told. We need the Latino perspective. On a daily basis, my friend groups include, well, my colleagues at SAC, Dr. Ramos, Dr. Marianne Bueno, who I met a bit way back in the 90s when I was a student at Mecha and she was at St. Mary's and she was at UTSA. Professor Mariano Aguilar, who I also met in the 90s. Those are people who I formed friendships with many years ago and who are still my friends. I now have two stepsons, and one of them had the opportunity to go to an immersion school called the Pineapple School, and so he speaks fluent Spanish. And a couple of months ago, I guess it was in spring, he had to write a paper about an event in history that had to do with discrimination. And so we talked a lot about it, and I hope that everything I've learned I can share with them. And that's about it for those points.
Thank you so much, Doctora Portales. Yeah, your story is so similar. We're of the same generation, and a lot of what we learned, we didn't discover until college, right? Like we didn't have this in pre-K through 12. So I'm so happy now that Mexican American Studies, or MAS, is expanding into our lower grades. So thank you for sharing your journey and your stories.
Sure.
So what I want to do now is I want to wrap up. I want to capture some of the main points that came across and some of the patterns, and also talk about resilience. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to follow Jasmine's directions and play from my current slide so that hopefully you all will see it much bigger. So give me 1 second while I figure this out. Okay. So what I have on here, I hope you all can see it. So it is a little PowerPoint I put together called Identities, the Power of Knowing and Sharing Your Story. And I based this on an article in the New York Times that came out about 7 years ago. I call this the power of knowing and sharing your story because this article was very revealing for me when I read it. I wrote my senior thesis 25 years ago on my family's identity. And I wrote mostly about my grandparents, but also about my parents and my own experiences. I moved to New York City when I was 18 and lived there for about 13 years on and off. So when I read this study, it helped me understand how I was able to survive and to soar there. And what I discovered was it had a lot to do with knowing my family's story. So let me connect it back to this study. So in the early 2000s, two psychologists got together. Well, not got together, they're married actually. These two psychologists decided that they were going to study families, resilience, and children's happiness and success. And they focused on how can we teach children? How can they be taught to be happy and to succeed in life? And their major finding was to create a strong family narrative. And I'm going to take what they say and extend that. I want us to think about family here broadly defined, because I want to acknowledge that some of us have been rejected by our biological families because we identify as queer or some other identities. So family doesn't just mean the biological family in this presentation. It means whoever your people are, whoever your gente are. So I'm going to go to the next slide. What they used in this study was a do you know scale. It was about 20 do you know questions. So you see some examples on the screen. Do you know where your grandparents grew up? Do you know where your parents met? Do you know an illness or something really terrible that happened in your family? And when I did my senior thesis, here it is, 25 years ago, for the first time, I learned the answers to all these questions. And I say this confidently that I would not have been able to get my PhD in history at an Ivy League institution if I didn't know who I came from and what my family struggles had been. So I say this to our students. I say this to anyone who's trying to achieve a goal, like you heard our speakers, like you heard Dr. Portales, like you heard Anthony, Erika, Celeste talking about their families and their journeys and their paths right now. Some are still pursuing their education. Some are done and have their degrees and have these careers. But I want to bet that if they didn't know their stories about their families, and like Anthony was saying, a grandfather who came here during the revolution, who, you know, if you believe in God, by the grace of God or by luck, managed to survive, that says something. Knowing that story, that carries you through. And that is what I learned in doing my senior thesis. So this particular study that the Dukes did was 50 families, about 200 individuals. And this is a quote from the article I read. When they were studying children who live with learning disabilities, they learned that the more children knew about their family's history, the stronger their sense of control over their lives, the higher their self-esteem, and the more successfully they believe their families function. So in other words, if you want to ensure, or maybe not guarantee, but help young people succeed, it's important they know who they come from and what they've been through in order so they can get to where they want to go. And what they found in this study is the type of family narrative that leads to the greatest happiness and success is the last one, the oscillating family narrative, meaning it's a narrative that combines the positive and the difficult experiences. So this kind of narrative builds a strong intergenerational self. So you talk about all the successes, all the positive moments, but you acknowledge the struggle, you acknowledge the challenges you face. So when Celeste was talking about moving to a new town and having to make the adjustments where she suddenly felt more visible, when Erika, when they were talking about moving to Round Rock and that experience, when that happens to us, if we have a strong sense of who we come from, that can help us survive and soar in those places. So lastly, these are some strategies for achieving happiness and success for yourself, for your children if you have them, grandchildren if you have them. The article talks about reflecting. That's one of the themes of our Raza Heritage Month. Reflect on what makes up your family's core. What are you about? What have you been through? And then together create a family mission statement and refer to that mission statement over and over. Make it something that is something you live by. And then as part of that mission statement, think about traditions. Maybe you have traditions you already follow, or if you don't, create some, share these traditions with your family, give meaning to that mission statement. So I want to end with that point that I started with. How do you help young people find happiness and success? You create a strong family narrative. And what they found in their study is that alone, that narrative may increase the odds that your family will thrive for many generations to come. So I hope that this identity event or identities event has helped you think about your own identities and where you're going and what you hope to accomplish. And I want to transition now to a writing activity that we want to do. But before I do that, I have to thank our amazing American Sign Language ASL interpreters. So you've seen them, David and Crystal. Thank you for translating, for the hard work you're doing. We're so appreciative that you joined us, that you made our event, you're making our event more accessible. So thank you to both of you, Crystal and David, for being with us here today. So next I'm going to ask Jasmine, if you could share, I know, there you go, thanks. The flyer that we have, we'd like to do a giveaway. If you were with us in the pre-panel, you played a game, maybe won a few prizes. Well, we have more prizes, so hopefully you all will participate. I want you to think about your own identities and think about how your story maybe relates to Celeste, Anthony's, Erika's, or Dr. Portales' stories. And I'd love to hear some of your own stories. If you want to comment in the chat box, I'd love to hear what you all have to say. And if you don't want to share, that's okay. You can still participate in this giveaway. So Jasmine, at any point, jump in the comments. But this is a giveaway we're having through Instagram. And what you can do is if you go to Instagram, if you have Instagram, you'll see this at the top of our feed. And you can respond to those two questions. What are your primary identities and how do they shape you? And if you respond, we're going to gather them all up, look at them, and we're going to judge which ones really stood out, and we're going to contact you and send you a prize. So there's more prizes. So please think about these. And before I guess we get too deep into the comments, maybe some people are already responding. I do want to acknowledge also Selena, who is there with you all in the comments, Selena Terrones, who's been helping to take care of the chat box. And I know she's been asking about questions. So now would be, I think, a good time, actually, before we get into what people might want to respond to the writing prompt. Any questions that came up that you might want to share, Selena, that we might want to post up on StreamYard? I'm scrolling through the comments too to see if I see any questions, so I can let Jasmine know. And if you didn't ask your question yet, you can ask it now for any of our panelists. I'm scrolling. Okay. So yes, I'll give you all a minute or two to think of the questions you have for any of our panelists or all of our panelists. So once you're ready, please start posting in the comments, and Jasmine will make sure to put your question up, and we'll call back one of our guests. So there's already a question there. So maybe we can pull up all our guests at the same time there, Jasmine? So the question is, what will you do to make the Hispanic community strong? So I'll let you all ponder that. And whenever anyone wants to speak, go for it.
I'll start. I think that you're doing a writing activity really warms my heart because I teach writing. But one of the best ways we can empower each other and our communities is to make sure that we record our stories and that our voices are heard. And even more than that, always that we make sure we tell younger generations that everything they've experienced is valuable, right? There's always this idea that there was a separation between what happened in our homes and what was supposed to go to school or, be in the ivory tower or wherever it might be. But everything that happens in our lives is valuable. Everything that our parents have done that we learned at home is just as valuable in our institutions.
Other panelists want to respond to that one. Thank you, Dr. Portales.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So something I work on to strengthen the, I guess, Latinx community, for a lack of a better homogenous word, is acknowledging anti-Blackness within the community, and acknowledging, problematicness that is in re-embracing our culture and cultura, by listening to Indigenous voices, listening to the Indigenous people that are still here in communities. So those are things that I do to build us as a stronger community as a whole, in terms of liberation.
Thank you. Very powerful points. I think that's really important with everything going on right now in the world, in our own country, addressing police brutality, addressing anti-racism, and being part of that change and recognizing the collaborations, the similarities that have always existed. We don't often get told them in schools or within our families. So thank you for sharing that. That's super important. So we have another question that's just popped up. What books would you recommend for someone who is learning how to identify within the Raza community?
I brought up Cynthia Orozco earlier, and I guess it's a little older book now, but I think it's really great. And she titles it "No Mexican Women or Dogs Allowed," because that used to be, a typical sign. Cynthia Orozco, a historian, and the subtitle is "The Rise of Mexican American Civil Rights Movement." So I think that's a really good perspective.
Thank you.
I have a book that I meant to go grab, and I didn't because I didn't want to leave the camera, but I actually got it signed. This is one of the books that really changed my life. It's called The Anglos and Mexicans in the Making of Texas, 1836 to 1986, by an author who's from here, David Montejano. I actually got to meet him in 2010 thanks to UTSA, and I haven't emailed him back. I was a little embarrassed, but I actually cried when I met him because of how the book impacted me. Again, it was one of them books that just opened my heart, opened my mind as to why some of our communities are still where they are, why our attitudes are still the same in certain communities. But it really did. It truly just lifted my spirits as to finally knowing what my family had to deal with in Texas when it was succeeded and stuff like that. So again, Anglos and Mexicans in the Making of Texas, 1836 to 1986. David Montejano is one of the books that I hold dear to my heart.
So Celeste, do you have any titles you want to share, or even poems, or not doesn't have to be a book, or even websites?
Well, I mean, right now when Anthony was talking about David Montejano, could it have been this book right here? Because this is one of his books.
Yeah, that was the one. He's written several. When I got to meet him, he wrote. When I got to meet him, he wrote the second version of where kind of Anglos and Mexicans held. I don't know that title, but he's written several. And like I said, he's born and raised here. Awesome professor. Awesome.
Okay, I just had that question.
And I like to say the previous question that Adam. One of the things that I think we can all kind of step up to do, not only myself, but I volunteer a lot is for mentorships in school with the organization called Communities in School, and I'm sure there's other organizations you could volunteer with, big brothers and sisters. I just think that being in the presence of our young people, young students of color, is just acknowledging that people of our stature, educated, coach, people who are knowing who they identify with. It's just something that we can give back, and I just say whatever way you could give back to the community and whatever aspect that is. That's one of the reasons why I do what I do, advising, is because I want to see people who of color or even just want to be educated to help them in any way I can. And that's what I suggest, is just volunteering in whatever capacity that is, in whatever you believe in.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
I did want to mention just two things for the recommendations. For me, an article that really changed my perspective in identifying is called Decolonization is Not a Metaphor by Eve Tuck and Kay Yang. And then also just like Profesora Portillo, am I saying that right? I feel like I'm saying that wrong. To value other sources of knowledge, so maybe not like zines or things that are written online by, you know, radical autonomous folks.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, that's a great point. I know Jasmine also posted that point as well. Yeah, the knowledge doesn't just exist within the academy. There's plenty of knowledge keepers and wisdom outside the academy. Thank you. I saw a question from, oh, okay, yes. So, Lucero, did you want to address this or did you want me to address it? Because I think this came up during the pre-panel. So I'm happy to try to address it, but please somebody help me if I mess it up. So are you all familiar? During the pre-panel fun facts portion of this event, we had a Kahoot game, and one or several of the questions were talking about identities. How does this celebrity identify? And one of the answers was fluid. And so someone who was attending the pre-panel asked, what does fluid mean? So I wondered if one of you all wanted to address it, or if you wanted me to do so, because I believe it was used in a way to refer to gender fluid. So I can share what I know, and then if anyone wants to chime in as well. So when I teach about this, when I teach about queer history and queer identities, we talk about the binary. And by binary, I like to say it's like that slash that separates, like male, female, for example, gay, straight. So gender fluid means we get rid of that slash, we get rid of that opposition. For some folks, that binary is not what defines their lives. So to be gender fluid means that you don't identify with just male or just female. You see your identity or identities as existing within this continuum. So it's a more complex idea of what gender means. That's gender fluid. Does anyone else want to add? Am I missing anything there?
I did want to say, I feel like I want to remember that it was mentioned with sexuality too. So maybe in terms of, because like I use queerness to identify myself within sex, gender, and sexuality because they're all different things. So in terms of fluidity for sexuality, that could mean someone who in the same way doesn't identify as either gay or straight or bisexual, but more understanding that that can change too and vary.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Anyone else?
Well, I was going to say that to include the sexuality section of the fluidity. I know that when I was trying to, decipher myself and my identity, no label ever seemed perfect to me. And then the idea of labels in general seems just odd. Like, why do they have to confine any part of ourselves when we're such complex creatures naturally? So, in a way, when speaking of sexuality, I can see how sexuality is a spectrum. We don't all fall in the same umbrella. We all have variations of it. And in that way, I would say that no one is inherently gay or inherently straight. There's a nice course pathway for everyone. And that's where I would say fluidity comes in.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. So our next question from our Somos La Gente, one of our officers, I want to give a shout out to Somos La Gente. Celeste Aguilera is a member of Somos La Gente, and they are an active student group. They advocate on behalf of Black, Indigenous, people of color, voices, perspectives, and they're very active and helped with the change, not helped, they started and led the Change the Ranger mascot campaign. So for all their hard work and for always attending our events, thank you to Greg and to Celeste and all the other Somos members that are here. I see you. So Greg's question is, do you all believe our identities receive adequate representation in the film industry, or are our identities neglected?
I'll start with that one.
That's a lot.
I absolutely feel that we are still neglected. During the summer, having summer and quarantine come together, we were watching and rewatching some series on television, on a streaming, and the big shows. Like, for example, I mean, I know it's old now, but Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, their setting is in Nuevo Mexico, and the characters are just as we've always had a problem with, represented as drug dealers, as if they're not drug dealers, they're mules, they're whatever it might be, but it's so limited. And also, the characters making jokes with the Latino characters, where they would make a joke and it was supposed to be comedic, but they would use racial slurs or something like that. So I know that Jim Mendiola, the filmmaker, talked about trying to work on some projects, and I forget what the name of it was, but I know that Eva Longoria wanted to be in this particular project where there were Latino women in the script. And Jim said that the production company said these women are not Latina enough because they wanted this story to be about immigrants. And Jim was so frustrated and said, Latinos are not always immigrants. I mean, there's really no one way to be Latino. There's Latinos who are, fourth generation Chicano Americans who are, Americanized in a different way. And so that's what the project was about. And they actually said these characters are not Latino enough because they refuse to show Latinos as just regular citizens instead of making caricatures out of us.
Wow. Thank you. Anyone else?
And also, if you guys want to read books about film, there's Chon Noriega at UCLA, and there's I forget his first name, but his last name is Ramirez Berg from UT Austin, who've written several books about Latinos in film and how they're represented.
Thank you.
To kind of answer that same question, I agree with everything you had just said. It's completely true that they place the Latinx community in under the same umbrella, making the same caricatures, same kinds of characters. I mean, only recently did the Academy suddenly add requirements to have full representation, and the fact that that even has to be a requirement because so many people weren't even doing it to begin with just speaks to how there isn't enough representation for a population that's been here for so long. There has been recent changes. I mean, when I was taking Dr. Marianne Bono's humanities class last semester, she had recommended the series Gentified, and although it's more of like a comedic drama, it does a much better job of showing the nuances of different kinds of intersectionality between being a queer woman who's also Mexican American, or just a woman being a Mexican American, or being whitewashed, these kinds of topics. Another show that is also fairly recent, One Day at a Time, although it's a Cuban American family, they also show the differences of generation and how that shapes a perspective from an older woman. Rita Moreno plays her. She's looking at things from her generation from back when she was a kid, which is like early 60s, to the much younger generation, Generation Z, someone around my age, who is discovering their sexuality, and how those kinds of conversations are different from them within being a Cuban American family. And those shows are now barely getting actual mainstream attention by being picked up by larger networks, and it's only because we're just now starting to see a new wave of media starting to secure our identity once again, even though it should have been long overdue.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, so I think we have one last question before we make a few announcements and remind you all about the writing prompt. So as someone who struggles with Spanish, this is Ms. Jackie Velez, who works at SAC. Hi, Jackie, good to see you. So as someone who struggles with Spanish, she says, I often feel like an imposter when trying to learn it. Can you give me any tips to overcome this feeling, the imposter syndrome? A lot of us have gone through that. Any tips from our panelists?
Oh, I really, really want to answer this because I can totally agree. As I guess Puchex or what is it? What is it? Right. I didn't speak Spanish. I wasn't taught Spanish. I learned Spanish on my own as my major. I try to soothe myself with the fact that Spanish is a colonized language, that it is not my original tongue, and that English, Spanish, all of these colonized languages can be remixed. They can be improperly, you know, the speech can flow in it whichever way, just like gender and sexuality. And that as long as you're feeling like you're connecting with your culture in words and palabras that you connect to, that's important. And don't beat yourself up about it too much, because wanting to meet that standard of perfection is also like trying to adhere to colonial language.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that. The rest of y'all, do y'all want to share? I know some of y'all had touched upon that. Do y'all want to share a little bit about your experience with or tips?
I totally agree with what she just said as well. I don't, again, I don't let that, not being in my first language, I don't let it kind of pull me away as to, being Mexican American enough or being Mexican enough. Again, I had the same conversation with a professor of mine as well, and I was so adamant. I was like, I shouldn't even learn Spanish because it's not even our language. And the only thing she told me was that some of the words are there were some of our native languages is in there because there were Spanish terms that they couldn't think of any words for, So she encouraged me to kind of drop that and just learn it as a education, learn a second language. And as far as like, I understand what you mean is, I get nervous when I can't think of words and stuff like that. But you know what? Your identity is what you are inside. It's spiritually, it's something that you embrace, and whatever that language is, that you can't speak, you shouldn't let it take it away from who you are. There's always apps on the phone and stuff like that, which I use all the time to translate. So that's my take on it.
Thank you.
If there's anything that I would want to tell you, Jackie, it would be when you start to say that you're feeling like you're an imposter, just know that no one else can take the way you identify away from you. No one has the right to do that, whether you speak the language fluidly or not. You have the roots within you, you have the spirit within you, you have the power within you. And whether you know the language as well as someone who was raised with it, or you're just now starting to pick it up, that does not invalidate the way you look at yourself. And there's power in you having confidence and security within that as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Celeste.
I agree with everything that's been said.
Thanks for wrapping us up, Dr. Portales. So thank you to our guest. This has been amazing. I love hearing people's stories. That's why I became a historian. And I've learned, I've taken some mental notes. And thank you for sharing this personal part of yourselves, because our stories are personal. It takes emotional labor. Sometimes these stories our struggles, and the fact that you were willing to share this with our audience. We're forever grateful to you for your time, your energy, and all the labor, the emotional and the intellectual labor that this has taken. So thank you for everything. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. So we're going to make a few announcements. So everyone who's hanging out with us, don't leave just yet. So first, we're going to have Professor Saldana talk to us about our next event.
Hi, everyone. How amazing was that? The panel. They're amazing, aren't they? Like, I know, let's clap for them, give them props virtually, send energy, whatever needs to happen. They're awesome. And they're probably on Facebook or Instagram as well, on Twitter. So if you have a chance, you know, it's always good to catch up on others via social media, especially during this time. I do want to remind y'all that we do have Raza Heritage Month for the whole entire month. Obviously, our second event is the Afro-Mexican Verdades, and we have two amazing panelists coming in. Alan Pelez Lopez, who we actually mentioned a little bit earlier, and Adriana Brown, who is a San Antonio native. So you do not want to miss this event. They are awesome. If you follow them on social media, like, oh my God, they're amazing. Twitter, Instagram. I mean, I see them all the time and I'm always liking their stuff. Maybe one day they'll like my tweet or something. But man, they're so powerful with their words. So please do not miss out on this event for sure. And then we also have our prizes for our next, our identity prizes, right? Our reflection. Like we said, this is SOY, it's me. So what are your identities? How do they shape you? If you are a part of this prize giveaway, you will definitely be chosen within the upcoming, maybe a few weeks, right, Lisa? The prizes will come in the next few weeks.
Yes, we're still in the process of ordering the prizes, but I would say give us until the end of the Raza Heritage Month and you should have your prizes by then. So
yeah, we're not going to forget, and I'm not going to let Lisa or anybody in SAC forget either. I promise you, whenever we say we're going to give something, I'm going to be like, hey, where are the prizes at? You know, we need our people in the audience to get their prizes. So definitely be a part of that writing reflection. Please follow us on Instagram. You can also follow, like us on Facebook. Scan the QR code. That will give you everything that you need. There's probably like a link tree in the comments as well. Yes. Anything else, Doctora Ramos?
Yeah. So thank you so much. I want to give a shout out to Professor Lucero Saldana, who's been teaching with us since the summer, right, Professor Saldana?
Since spring. I started with COVID.
Yes, that's right. COVID's messed with my memory. Yes, thank you so much. Who's been teaching with us from the spring, also taught in the summer, and is now teaching for us in the fall. Amazing community activist, grad student, and professor. And she's really helped out a lot with Raza Heritage Month. And this was her idea to do this event. She came up with the awesome title and just helped with the planning, the pre-panel. So I want to give a big, big shout out to her. Also want to thank again Selena Terrones, who was there in the comments, helping us with the behind the scenes and also helping us organize all our information beforehand. So thank you so much, Selena. And last but certainly not least, our MOS program administrative support specialist, Jasmine Munoz, who everything that you're seeing, all the switches that are going on from person to person, she's been doing. In the private chat, we've been communicating. So she is the person behind the curtain doing all the work and just helped so much with this event. So big, big, big shout out to Jasmine Munoz, also a grad student there at UTSA doing great things. So I'm so honored to work with such amazing people. And lastly, I did want to share one more thing that I'm going to see if I can share my screen again.
I'm going to answer a question that I saw. I think you wanted to know what classes I teach. I teach Humanities 1301, 1302, and Intro to Mexican American Studies and Mexican American Fine Arts as well. So if you see my name, please take my classes. We'll have some fun. I'm a non-traditional professor, so I make assignments a little bit interesting every now and then.
Yes, like some of your students are going to be reading the corridos that they wrote. Was it during the summertime in your class? One of your classes?
They're going to be actually introducing their pandemic corridos or COVID corridos, which is an assignment that I thought it would be super awesome to do with, the pandemic, just to document oral history too.
Awesome. Thank you. And that event is coming up. I want to say it's on October 13th. Actually, let me share my screen now so we can see. Yes, so that event where students from Professor Saldaña's summer course are going to be reading their pandemic corridos. It's on Tuesday, October 13th. The event is Resiliency in the Time of COVID-19. And the very last thing I wanted to say is that we have another event that I think a lot of you all might be interested in. If you liked hearing the stories today, if you feel like you want to share your story now, there's something else you can do. We have something called the SAC Stories Project. And this project is about collecting the stories from anyone who's ever come through SAC, who's been a student or staff member, faculty, administrator, and wants to share how being at SAC has shaped their lives and how they have contributed to SAC. So we're still working on this. It's in its infant stages, but we hope to make this an ongoing project. So it's not just limited to the dates up there for Raza Heritage Month. This is an ongoing project that's probably going to be going on for a year or two. So if you'd like more information, just give us a little bit more time and we're going to add some information on how you can participate, either to share your story, or if you're more interested in being an interviewer, we'll share some information on how you can be the one asking someone else to share their story. So I wanted to also promote that event. And again, thank you to everyone. Thank you to our audience for showing up, for supporting us, for your comments, for your questions. And we're so happy that this went pretty smoothly, I think, for our first fully virtual event. So honored to be here with our audience too. I saw a lot of colleagues, I saw a lot of students. So thank you all for coming. Wish you a good night, muy buenas noches, and we hope to see you at our next event. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Adios.